Jess, you did a great job giving us the quickie version analysis of this. You've had a little more time now to go through the decision. Tell us what you found.
Well, a couple things. There is one area, well, first let me just say, for those who are keeping score, there are two big surprises in this opinion. One is that Justice Anthony Kennedy is in the minority here. Everyone had assumed that he would be in the majority either way. So that's an interesting note, footnote to the history of the Supreme Court. Also, that the administration did have a loss in the area of Medicaid, at least a partial loss. The Affordable Care Act expands eligibility for Medicaid, and the 26 states challenging the act, their particular complaint was that they would be kicked out of the entire Medicaid program if they didn't also buy into the expansion of Medicaid. And the Supreme Court, again with the Chief Justice taking the lead, says that that penalty on the states, punishing the states by kicking them out of the entire Medicaid program if they don't go along with the expansion, it exceeds congressional power, and they're not allowed to do that.
Oh, so that's a big victory for the states then, for the states that wanted to opt out of the expanded Medicaid plan.
That's right. They don't face that choice. Of course, the incentive for them to take part is actually quite extensive. The federal government pays 90% of the cost. But
haven't we had a couple of dozen states that have already expressed their desire to opt out of the Medicare expansion?
Absolutely, and now we'll see if they mean it.
So we could have a divided country here in terms of Medicare eligibility and Medicare coverage, which would have interesting...
Medicaid,
I'm sorry,
Medicare.
Medicaid. You're absolutely right. Medicaid coverage and Medicaid eligibility, which would have interesting social ramifications if you have widely different Medicaid standards depending on the state.
That's right, and we'll see if that, if the states actually do follow through with refusing to expand their coverage, and we'll see if that has any effect on where people choose to live. Perhaps people, who would benefit from Medicaid expansion will move to states where they are taking part in it. The other thing I thought we could also talk about quickly is a bit of what the dissenters had to say. They had a unified dissent that Justice Kennedy read, and he conveniently provided the text of what he read from the bench today. So I'll just quote from that. After explaining his agreement on the commerce issue and noting that 5 justices, including the chief, agree that the insurance mandate is not a valid use of congressional commerce authority, he then criticizes the chief justice and the liberals on the court for what they did with the taxing argument. And he says, he writes here, 5 members of the court pivot and hold that the individual mandate is a tax for constitutional purposes. And to do this, the majority rewrites the statute Congress wrote. We disagree. He says the act requires purposes of health insurance. Right. What Congress called a penalty, this court calls a tax. What Congress called a requirement, this court calls an option. He says, in short, the court imposes a tax where Congress deliberately rejected a tax. And then he goes on to say that Congress went to great lengths to structure the mandate as a penalty, not a tax. The majority says it is, at least for the purpose of sustaining it. He finds that very troubling.
Fascinating. That's fascinating, Jess, to have Justice Kennedy end up on that side of Chief Justice Roberts. It scrambles the politics of the Supreme Court, which frankly is probably a good thing, but it also increases the pressure and the focus that Chief Justice Roberts no doubt is going to feel in the coming days.